Is imaginative drawing necessary for animation and illustration? Today I'm going to be talking about that. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist in the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So I've been asked by one of my patrons this question. I was wondering if you would make a video about whether or not it's important to be able to draw from imagination or not for animation or illustration. Okay, so the simple answer is yes. You, especially for animation, you have to be able to draw from your imagination pretty much all the time. I mean, that's all it is. It's imaginative drawing. For illustration, it depends on the illustration. There's lots of different types of illustration. Some of it is purely imaginative illustration, but there is other types of illustration that is essentially you go take pictures, hire models, and then you paint what you took a photo of. So there is that kind of illustration, and then there's the other, and then there's the type of illustration where you do the exact same thing, and then you also get photos from other places on the web. It's called photo bashing, and basically what you do is you take a photo and you collage it digitally with other photos, and then you paint on top of that to all make it all feel like one cohesive photo, and they tend to look half like a weird hodgepodge of painted and photographic, and it kind of blurs the line between painting and photo. So that's photo bashing, and you again it does take imagination to do that, because you still got to plan it and work it all out and everything, but it's not 100% purely imaginative drawing, as in you're starting from scratch with nothing and then you're just doing something from imagination. Okay, so the question, one of the things about this question was that struck me was that it was asking a question that I personally thought was kind of self-explanatory. That I thought that the idea of being able to do something from your imagination, especially if you're an animator, would be obvious, which made me wonder why the question was asked. So I pursued the question a little bit further, and I'm not trying to bring down the question. In fact, part of the problem was me, because here's something that happens to all of us that know something that somebody else doesn't. We have what is called the problem of knowledge. The problem of knowledge is that if you know something, and it took you a while to learn it, you forget what it's like not to know. And so it's difficult for you to be able to communicate with somebody sometimes, because you forgot what it felt like not to know that thing. And when you don't remember what it's like not to know, it's difficult for you to understand or figure out a way to communicate it so that you can let the person understand and know. You see what I'm saying? So this is the problem that I had gotten into this time around. The problem of knowledge. I didn't remember what it was like not to know the answer to this question, which is why I pursued the question further. When I asked why the question was even asked, the answer was, it says, many artists talk about drawing from reference and how essential it is, but many artists also push drawing from imagination, especially a lot of high-level artists in game art and animation. It made me wonder if great imagination drawing is necessary or just a nice bonus. And then I answered the question, but there was a disconnect. So the disconnect was what was meant by imaginative drawing. Now, imaginative drawing, when you're thinking about drawing from your imagination, often is thought by many people that there is a difference between drawing from reference and drawing from imagination. And this is true to a certain extent. So, for example, if you are taking a photo and you are drawing that photo, you are drawing from reference. And you are using, and you're not really using your imagination too much. I mean, you're reinterpreting what you're seeing, but it's not an imaginative drawing. However, in the animation industry, we have what are called model sheets. Model sheets are drawings of the character. They're turnarounds so that we can see the character in a 360 view, so that everybody in the studio is drawing the characters consistently. Everybody draws, for example, where I work on The Simpsons, everybody has to draw Bart exactly the same way. He had to look exactly the same in every single shot. There are hundreds of different artists working on different shots. They all have to look like only one person drew it. So we all have to draw Bart to look the same. So we have this model sheet. This is how he looks like. This is what he's supposed to look like. Everybody draws Bart the same way. Okay. That's reference. Does that mean that we are not drawing for our imagination because we're using a model sheet to make sure that our drawings are consistent with each other? Well, no, that's not true. I mean, I can draw Bart from my head without using a model sheet, doing anything I want, right? But I still use the model sheet just to make sure that I've got everything exactly right, because it is my job to make sure that Bart looks on model. So I still use him. I use the model sheet. Whenever I'm not at the job or whenever I'm storyboarding, I usually don't use the model sheet because it's not necessary for me to get him perfect. But whenever I'm doing character layout, I do use the model sheet a lot. Another thing is that in animation, when we're trying to do something and we're struggling with a drawing, or we're struggling with a pose, or in any kind of illustration, actually, it doesn't really matter if it's animation or illustration. If we're drawing a character from our imagination, but we're struggling with what it could look like, and we're drawing it and we're drawing it and we're like, oh, I can't figure this out. So then what we do is that we either go to a mirror and then we do the pose, you know, or we're trying to draw the hand in a certain way, but we're struggling with the hand, and we look in a mirror, or we take a photo of our hand in that pose and then we use that as a guide, as reference, so we can get that pose right. Is that imaginative drawing, or are you just using reference? It's both. It's from your imagination. What you're doing is using a guide for your imagination. So again, it's one of these things where there seems to be a disconnect. There seems to be this notion that somehow imaginative drawing is magic. That there isn't, that you shouldn't ever look at anything ever. This isn't how imaginative drawing works. We draw things from imagination, but we also get inspired by reality, and we get inspired by reference, and sometimes we, like in the case of the model sheets, we need to use the reference to enhance our imaginative drawing. It's not necessarily not, it doesn't stop it from being imaginative drawing. Do you see? So there's this thing about drawing from reference, drawing from life. And one of the reasons you draw from reference and drawing from life is so that you could build the mental library in your brain of what things look like. And the idea is that you're assimilating it, you're experiencing it, you're memorizing it, so that when you draw from imagination, you're able to regurgitate what you've drawn visually before. And so the more you draw from reference at first, the more vocabulary you bring into yourself, the more you start learning more about what things really look like. So that the more you draw from reference at first, you will stop using it because you'll start to memorize from experience, from the reference that you've had before, what things look like. So if you were struggling with that hand over and over and over, and you keep drawing it, but you're paying attention to what you're doing, and this is the trick. You pay attention, you break it down, and you really assimilate it using formulas that you've learned. After a while, you'll stop having to look at your hand. You'll have to stop looking at the photos. You'll stop looking at reference to get it, because you've done it so many times that it's just become part of your experience. It's in your head. It's in your hard drive. You're just doing it. But at first, you have to do it over and over. You assimilate it. It takes time to assimilate it. It takes time for you to learn it. And then after a while, you're able to learn it. So when you see people doing things from your imagination, like Kim Jong-gi or other people that are just boom, 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 and they just crank it out and they're not using any reference, it's because they've been doing it for so long that they've assimilated it. But it took a while for them to assimilate it using reference at first, looking at observational things. It complements. So the reference complements imaginative drawing. So imaginative drawing is necessary for things like in animation, things for like comics. You go faster, way faster after you've done comics for so long that you've assimilated so much information, but at first it's going to go really slow because it takes you longer because you have to look at stuff in order to assimilate it. But you have to assimilate it at first. And the difference between drawing things from life and drawing things from imagination is usually the formulas that you learn. And then there's no right formula. There is only the formulas that work. And the purpose of drawing formulas, whether it's Loomis, whether it's Bridgman, whether it's Michael Hampton, wherever you're going to get Steve Houston, wherever you're going to get the formulas for drawing, those are tools that you use in order to solve drawing problems for things that you haven't quite yet experienced. But even then, once you have the formula, sometimes the formula gets in the way of natural of the way that you would naturally draw something, which in turn makes you need to look at reference in order to make sure that when you use the formula, you're using it right. So it's a little bit of give and take, but the formulas are memorized formulas, so that you can use them as again to figure out really difficult drawing problems. The entire point of a formula is to fix drawing problems, to allow you to draw things from your imagination in such a way that you can solve the drawing problem using the formulas. But the formulas are complemented by reality, because the formulas are meant to represent something that exists in the real world. So when you look at it in the real world and you look at it in a formulaic way, and then you blend the two, and then you get like a beautiful looking drawing based on what the aesthetic that you feel like putting down. So that would be the answer to the question in a deeper sense, that imaginative drawing isn't quite reference-less. You still need to look at reality. If you're going to draw a fire hydrant, you should look at fire hydrants instead of drawing a symbol or the idea of a fire hydrant that you've had, because it may be inaccurate. So And then once you've drawn a fire hydrant a few times, then you could draw them from imagination because you've memorized what a fire hydrant looks like. But a lot of the time, you're in your head, you think you know what a fire hydrant looks like, and you may or may not be right, depending on how well you observe things. But it would be a good idea to at least look at a fire hydrant just to make sure you're being right. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I would say about imaginative drawing. One of the things that he brought up was game art. Game art. A lot of the concept development stuff is often photo bashed because of the time constraints that the artist has for cranking out development art. They don't have time to be painting everything perfect, and nobody's supposed to be looking at that stuff anyway except the people inside the studio who are supposed to be trying to model and do all the other stuff. So sometimes there's shortcuts that you take even within the job description of game art and things like that. But for the most part, imaginative drawing is pretty much a must for any kind of for most illustration and animation jobs. 90%, 99% of the time you're drawing from your imagination with reference as a supplement. It's not just straight copying photographs, which is what I mean. Imagine let me be absolutely clear. Imaginative drawing does not mean that you never look at any kind of reference ever. Okay, that's not how imaginative drawing works. So it's okay to look at some reference. It's okay. Eventually, you may not need to. But even when you're so good that you don't need to, you sometimes still need to. So if 99% of the time you don't need to look at it, you still 1% of the time still need to look at something. Okay. All right. So I hope that clarifies a lot of things. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time. All right. Bye.